We're coming, and we ain't backing down.
We don't need a bunch of cats in here looking in the mirror.
Everybody just do your job! You understand that?
Hey, will you shut up?
I'm bitterly disappointed with the officiating today.
Guys being dudes.
And they run through our like through a tin horn, man.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Les. Alex, both of us buried under multiple feet of snow in the north, the Great White North. This morning, I logged on to The Bird, and a certain college football reporter in the zeitgeist of the sport tweeted out this like ancient screenshot of like a 8-bit Game Boy Advance looking video game. And it was interesting. So I wanted to bring him on to talk about it because I think it dovetails into some news that came out later this day. The reporter is, of course, Steven Godfrey. First time on the show. Welcome to the show, Steven Godfrey.
Let me tell you something about ancient, you son of a bitch. Game Boy Advance came out when I was in college. You son of a bitch. Game Boy came out when I was a child.
Was that a screenshot of
that is
Bill Walsh?
That is Bill Walsh's college football, which I have a copy of somewhere around in my office for the Super Nintendo, and that is the nascent sort of predecessor to what would become NCAA. If you are super fired up about the news that we're going to get to in 2 seconds, there is a documentary right now on Netflix called High Score, I think. It was made like last year. There's basically an entire episode. There's an episode about the console wars between Super Nintendo and Genesis. As it pertains to this show, there is an origin story on how video game football is basically comes to be and how it is so taxing for a computer in the 1980s to understand 22 individual players doing 22 different things on a play that they had to wait for the technology to catch up. It's very interesting, and I highly recommend it.
What's it called?
The documentary is called High Score, and it's basically like the history of video games. So it's got the first episode's like about Atari and shit like that, but I think it's like the third episode is about specifically how EA Sports is founded, and then the fact that like that whole software company is the biggest video game company in the world is built around their founder's passion for American football. And I'm going to jump right in and just say that today's announcement, I feel like I'm doing Alex's job for him. Today's announcement,
Alex, the co-host on the podcast, I didn't even talk yet.
Is maybe the most important thing for the future of college football fandom that's happened in like my adult lifetime.
Alex is back.
Back, baby. Back. Hi, gentlemen. Good to be with you both. It is a big deal. The big deal itself is that EA Sports is officially now intending to bring back college football video games. We've all talked to some people over the last couple of years and days about this whole dynamic, and I think it's been clear for a long time that EA has been ready and waiting for the NCAA to sort out its own house as far as sharing some of the profits from a game like this with players and restarting some of the licensing arrangements that are crucial to a game like this. As it turns out, it's done one of those things, but so far not the other. Right now, the NCAA is still sitting on its hands and hoping that Congress or a federal judiciary might somehow bail it out of needing to offer an expansive name, image, and likeness reform package to players.
And that is probably not going to happen.
Probably not. I'm not expecting the feds to come to their rescue. So in the interim, basically EA's plan is to begin planning, developing, though not really developing at this point, a game that goes ahead with no player likenesses whatsoever and simply licenses schools, stadiums, bowl games, etc., to create a game similar to the one that we all played and loved for all those years. That's a bit of a surprise, I think, given where this conversation seemed to be a year or so ago, where I think it was considered pretty unlikely, including by people who are really knowledgeable about this and have, a first-hand understanding of how these things go. It was considered unlikely then that they would try to make a game that just didn't have players in it at all, because it just might be, what do you call it, a bad look for schools in particular, for the NCAA to go ahead and do that. It appears that that's the track they're on unless NIL gets passed. And my guess is that in this kind of waiting period that they're still in, that they'd like to see some kind of resolution to that. Godfrey?
So, go ahead, Godfrey.
That is an accurate representation of the timeline and the projection. One thing I would like to point out is that EA themselves today, in additional comments, said that this is not a flip the switch overnight process. We have talked about this on past shows, that video games are very expensive to make and they take a long time. They take years, right? You can go and shoot a new Marvel movie, and from the time that you start pre-production to the time the film goes into theaters, it's about a year. It can be. They can do it in about a year. And that's literally everything from concept to you sitting in a movie theater. A video game that is quality, that makes a lot of money from a publisher like EA, takes years and years and years. I mean, it's something akin to like an Olympics or an election cycle to create a quality video game. Now, I don't want everyone to die. I said 4 years. If we're all... okay, don't worry about the NIL thing for a second, guys.
If they started tomorrow,
it
could be done in 18 months, but they are not starting tomorrow.
So let's say right now, it's the year 2021. It's February now. I am going to say that at E3 of 22, that the subject is.
They still even do E3?
Well, they still do E3. It was obviously not in person like everything else in the world last year. E3 is a big showpiece for EA specifically. They actually have an event before it called EA Play, and they sort of set the tone for it. Like if you imagine if Marvel goes to Comic-Con and announces the new Avengers movie, EA has that power in the video game industry. That's why I'm saying they go to E3 every year to be like, hey, this is what's new in FIFA, this is what's new in Madden, and then here's everything else that we're working on. That's how big those properties are.
For the uninitiated, E3 is a giant, basically trade show, and EA does that, Sony does that, Xbox does that, everybody does it at that thing. It's in Vegas, right?
It is. No, it's now in Los Angeles. They've spread it out to the point where trade show is what that is the definition of it, but it is now certain events are open to the public, and they just want to sort of turn it into an event, period, obviously, because media has shifted away from journalists and more towards influencers and social media types. So my prediction on this podcast, this was announced this morning, is that there will be an address mentioning NCAA at E3 2022, and that a full game will launch August of 2023.
Yeah, that's about where I'm on it too. You will note that this game is not being called NCAA football insert year. This is being called EA Sports College Football. There are a couple of reasons for that, in my opinion. We may have to go back to therapy words here. I feel I know. I feel that they would do this without the NCAA because I don't necessarily think they need.
I know they would do it without the NCAA.
For the teams. The way that they have gotten the teams on board is through a collegiate licensing service that is a group license that apparel dealers have to deal with, etc. It's a lot easier to deal with one group licensor for 100 some odd teams than it is to deal with 100 some odd teams individually. Some big teams are not in the CLC group. What will happen is EA will probably negotiate with them individually to be in the game. Don't worry about it if your team isn't part of CLC. Isn't on the team list. EA said, intentionally vague, that they have 100+ institutions ready to roll, which again is a lot. But I actually think there are some big schools that aren't in CLC, like Georgia.
One thing that comes with this. Go ahead, Richard. I'm sorry.
So what I really think they're doing here is, I think their extended timeline of not announcing a launch date is to A, it's going to take a long time to build the damn game, but B, they're also waiting to see how the landscape shifts, and the landscape will shift quite a bit with name, image, and likeness and stuff. Because name, image, and likeness is happening. Whether it happens this year or it happens next year, it is happening. And when it does, EA will be ready.
Gentlemen, do y'all know anything about permit construction? Y'all ever worked in construction?
No.
I have not, personally.
Okay, so here's what
These
happens.
hands are too pretty for that.
So in most parts of America, if you want to build a house, you want to build an apartment, you want to build a second house on your property, you got to get permits, okay? Every state, every city, every parish, every municipality, every covenant is different, every township. I have a point here. Trust me. This is like mailbox money. It's going to come back around, okay? What a lot of people do when they're not allowed to build a second residence on their property is they build everything they want to except the definition of the thing. So here's what I mean. Let's say you can't build a second house on your property for your mother-in-law suite or to rent it out to somebody, right? I'm going to build an apartment over my garage. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get a permit, and I'm going to build everything but what constitutes a house. In this case, that means in most states, at least it does in Davidson County, Tennessee, is a toilet and a shower. I can put a stove in there, okay? Richard lives in New York City. You know all about this tricky shit. And put a stove in there, right? I can put a microwave in there. I can do all that kind of shit, right? No toilet, okay? No shower. Do you know what you do to get around that? You build a space where a toilet would be and a shower, and then you put 2 doors over it, they can be sliding doors. You don't even have to do that. You can just put a door there, or you can just put up some drywall. Building inspector comes by and says, this is not a residence. Check, you're good. Guess what you've done? You then take a claw hammer, knock that damn drywall out. Oh my gosh, what's this plumbing doing here? I could just put a toilet right here, and boom, the septic lines up. This is what I've described is what happens in 90% of permit construction, okay? So let me bring this back around.
One day when I own a home, your ass is getting so many phone calls.
This is my curse in life, is to raise you two in different ways. What you do if you're EA is this, because Alex's assessment and timeline is dead on. However, we talk about flipping a switch. You can build out the world's greatest college football game for PS5, for the next series of Xboxes, hell, even for the next generation. And you can do everything but create a player likeness, name database, all of that stuff until the very last minute. Or, hypothetically, you could do all of that in a silo. So if, let's say, Alex, the state of North Carolina, California, pick which state is going to bend the NCAA's hands backwards. Somebody is going to hold them down and beat them with a stick this year.
Might be Florida, honestly.
Could be Florida. My money's on North Carolina or California at the moment because they've been very vocal about it. I think the NCAA in the next 2.5 years has to capitulate, and they have to give up.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. Yeah,
and then
they can't have 50 states with 50 NLI rules. That literally can't happen.
And while that's happening, everybody at EA, turns out they built a space for that toilet after all.
Crazy.
Okay? Boom, that game ships. You have player likeness. You have the ability for athletes to insert themselves, as well as some functionality for compensation or reward, because that last part will be the sticking point.
And Alex, I want to tee you up on this because, Alex, you want to know somebody who's done good labor reporting in college football and around college sports. It is one Alex Kirshner. But the one thing before that I want to say, it's not a coincidence that this news, that this news came out today, February 2nd, because as we record this podcast, EA is having its earnings call today. So it's not exactly a coincidence that this news came out today right before EA got on to talk to their investors and shareholders, et cetera, about the future. There is some uncharted stuff about this, mainly as Godfrey is getting to player likeness, but there's also the team side to it too. I was talking to our buddy Matt Brown earlier today. He was telling me, he's like, it's not like teams got like a windfall from this game back in the day.
They do not.
It was decent, but it wasn't.
It's massive. It's five
Alex,
figures.
But Alex, the player portion of this is what is going to be very interesting and very uncharted as far as the territory.
It is. I mean, the team portion is simple. The team portion is eventually everyone's going to be in the game for no other reason than that a coach does not want to have to explain to a 17-year-old in his living room why, if you come to my school,
you will notice many a college football team tweeted about the game.
Absolutely. And Georgia, for instance, is not going to go recruiting, and Kirby is not going to have to explain in every living room why, if you come be a dog, you're not going to get to be in the video game. But if you go to some other school, you will be in the video game. It's never going to happen. All of these schools will fall into line and be in the video game. And the exchange of cash isn't even the thing. It's barely what is valuable to them. But on the player side, I think that is more complicated because even if the NCAA comes around and passes name, image, likeness reform, or if the feds make them do it, You still have to have some kind of group licensing vehicle. We've talked about this. There's no players union in college football, and that's a significant impediment. So,
And there probably
won't be, not anytime soon. So you need some sort of infrastructure in order to facilitate the insertion of likenesses into this game. If that happens, I do think there will be something. And like Godfrey said, it's not like this is a thing they have to figure out before they get started. But that is, to me, a more serious obstacle than getting teams to agree to be in. They're all going to do it.
Alex, the question that I have for you, the question that I have for you, Alex, is if so. So let's say a team. Let's say Oklahoma. You're playing Oklahoma. Back in the day, you would play with QB number 7. And conspicuously, that QB number 7 would have the same skin tone and sweatbands as Spencer Rattler. Do you think, if no NLI passes, let's pretend that's going to happen, do you think that EA would even go far enough to do that again?
No.
Or would they completely, they wouldn't get near that, and it would be some 4'2" white guy you're playing with instead of Spencer Rattler?
Yeah, I think that it would be entirely random. Godfrey?
One aside again to plug a documentary that I have no stake in. I was watching this high score thing. Look, some of us have teething children. Some of us watch Netflix at 1:45 in the morning after we've been asleep for 4 hours, not coming home from the bar. EA is responsible for African Americans being in video games, period, full stop, because they were the first ones to do it, introducing an element of realism into the actual players. So that jogged my memory, because you were talking about Spencer Rattler. Someone who is very distinct looking, right? Mm-hmm. You wouldn't come near it if you're EA.
No.
Not after all this river of shit that's gone on. So they definitely want this to happen. Let me say this. Everybody wants this to happen. I thought Joe Brady's tweet today, or not Joe Brady, sorry, Joe Burrow, Freudian, I guess. Joe Burrow's tweet today was very telling in that he was just like, hey, this is all I ever wanted. And this is the guy who's taken number 1 in the NFL draft,
right?
And
signed
won
for
a
$20
national
million a year, yeah,
and a Heisman. And he goes, "This is all I ever wanted, was to be on the cover of this video game, and now it came back after I'm gone." The players want this. The players are going to, and I'm not trying to short sell the labor side of this before Alex gets me, but the players are going to say, "Hey, I will sign my likeness away for a copy of the game and $1,500 or $1,000, whatever." It's not going to be a lot of money. But I do think there will be some way of doing this that's not going to be a massive financial windfall for the kids. It won't be. I don't know exactly what the details are yet. But they want it because they believe, and they might be right, this may not be youthful naivete. I think these kids know that there's a marketing power in this, which brings me to my bigger point. This is necessary for college football.
Yes.
One of the crosses I bear, and I am laughed at in my neck of America, is that this is not a national sport, and I'm starting to get more and more worried. I had a conversation 10 minutes before we started this podcast with someone who confirmed that exact theory of mine, because they work in corporate advertising in the world of sports. Entire portions of this country, when you go to corporate America, either regional corporate America or national buys, whatever kind of advertising you're doing, there are entire portions of this country right now that are looking at this, and 2 alarming things. One, they're saying their consumer base is not as interested in it as other things as they used to be 15 years ago. That's one. 2 is kids. And when I say kids, I'm talking like 15 to 25. Okay? The reason why is, do you know what EA's most successful game is? It's FIFA. Okay?
Let me go for it, but I got something on that in a second.
It's terrifying to me, working in college football, seeing the minor pieces of erosion going on with consumer interest at a younger generation in this sport specifically, and the general either idiocy or indifference by the corporate powers that control this sport to not recognize the canary in the coal mine. Hey, I worked in the newspaper industry in the early aughts. I've seen some shit fall apart, and I'm telling y'all now, it's a slow death and a slow decline, and you're not going to see it in Birmingham, Alabama. Okay, you're not going to see it in Charleston, South Carolina, but you're seeing it across the country in a lot of transitioning cultures like Arizona. We talked about this before, all those purple places, right? College football isn't keeping its foothold, and that's why a video game is so necessary to market to that generation.
That's also why the playoff is going to expand, but that's another conversation for another day.
Well, it needs
real quick. Let me just read 2 figures from you. Fiscal year 2015, $587 million. Fiscal year 2020, $1.49 billion. Any guesses from either of you what those figures reflect?
Fascinating question.
One more time for the listeners.
Fiscal year 2015, $587 million. Fiscal year 2020, $1.49 billion.
Playoff
That's
revenue.
the video game industry.
He's in the ballpark. That is the net revenue for Electronic Arts, EA, from Ultimate Team. Not the video games, from the microtransactions in Ultimate Team across both FIFA and Madden. So this game is going to be different when it comes out. And I don't know how they do this, because this may be a whole nother licensing thing that they're going to have to deal with. But the ability for instance, EA to do Ultimate Team with college football legends, that's a way bigger pie or group than even what they do with Madden.
One thing that I think will be interesting to watch, and Robbie Calland over at Uprocks made an important point about this in a story that he wrote shortly after this news came out, is that, as you're mentioning, this microtransaction wave has really taken off between the time that the last NCAA football came out and the time that this inaugural EA Sports College Football will come out. This is a game that is unique in that we play it for Dynasty mode. I don't think that most people who play.
We did. I don't know if this generation.
And I don't.
Ooh, man, this is a big conversation.
It's a big conversation. But
Yeah.
I think, and knowing some of the folks who have worked in this space and how much they cared about that game mode, I am hopeful and expectant that this game will put more into Dynasty mode than a typical sports franchise at this point does into its team building mode. Obviously, in a lot of ways, for most games, it's less lucrative for a game developer to focus on an experience that you play solo and you don't pay for beyond the $60 that you spend on the game or whatever it may be. I think it might be different here because of how much of the audience's expectations are rooted around Dynasty mode being great.
Anecdotally, you give me a true false whether you guys agree with this. We all have the stories of like everyone I've talked to today, everyone I've talked to about this game ever has those stories of whatever phase they are in life or were in life. If you were old enough to have had a moment with the NCAA game, you probably were with a friend in real life called like Couch Co-op, because it was sort of pre-online. It wasn't really quite there. And then you probably binged it, right? You probably played the game for like 6, 8, 12 hours, right?
Yeah,
More than likely, everybody has that kind of experience. I don't know if that stuff can be replicated the same way. I don't know. Go ahead.
Oh, well, no, I was going to say, I think you're right, but it becomes a more digital experience. I mean, I still play COD with the boys till 2 a.m. Like, it's just a different experience. And I do think the game is coming out, like, you're not just going to get NCAA 14 slapped on with a new code of
No. I think that this is what I was getting at. I think that culture's over. And to Alex's point, and to yours too, Richard, about Ultimate Team, true or false, is it fair to say every anecdote that you have about hanging out with your friends and playing this game, the more you played, the less you played the football?
Sure, yeah. The more you started fucking with stuff.
I can remember this white trash version of the Matrix where you're just fucking staring at the recruiting menu for hours, because
or you played it in a dumb way where you like put all the linemen at quarterback or whatever.
I mean, I would be curious, honestly, what a 19-year-old right now, if you went back through those menus and that UI and that functionality and showed them what we did to replicate really up in our brains. I'm pointing to myself. This is an audio format. We were creating stories in our heads based off of these menus because of our passion for the sport. That's not going to translate in 2023. So I'm very curious, how you take that to the next modern level. I will say this last thing I got is this is really important for EA. This is the most goodwill I've ever seen expressed towards EA. Maybe in video games in a single day. Video games are notoriously acrimonious, like Gamergate, and it's a very fractious, passionate community of a lot of people that are have extreme political ideologies. This was the fucking end of Return of the Jedi today, where it was just celebrations everywhere in every kind of community of anyone who gave a shit about this game. And EA needs that right now. They just lost exclusivity on Star Wars. If you're a gamer, you know that Anthem is not doing great. it was this and the Mass Effect trilogy today. This is going to be a very, very important thing for EA, which is good if you're listening to this, because that means they're going to pour a lot of passion into restoring this franchise, and that's exciting.
Yeah, the last thing that I have before we get to a couple questions, before we do SCD, is I think that, I know that the college esports community is sort of fledgling, but I really do think what this could do potentially for college esports, and if you get a lot of college esports, God, I just called it NCAA, a lot of college esports, EA Sports football, teams or whatever going, what that could do for esports and college esports. I just think it's going to be interesting, and what streaming culture and what gaming culture looks like in 2023 is clearly, obviously, going to evolve and be different from what it is even right now. So it's going to be fascinating, and it's going to be fascinating to drop this nostalgia bomb, particularly for people like me and Alex who are just getting old enough to have actual authentic nostalgia for things. When you take that nostalgia bomb and drop it into, we'll be 30 when this comes out. Christ. That is going to be just pure.
Wow.
Maybe you'll be.
Wow,
I'll be 29.
Might as well walk into the East River, right?
I'll be 29. I want to put a bow on this, that in the few hours, we're recording this 5 hours after this news came out, 146,000 people have followed the Twitter account for this not yet existent game. So that's pretty good engagement. That's a media exec would be wow, great synergy opportunities here.
Yeah.
Also, if certain people listening to this podcast at a certain video game development company needs help designing, testing, writing aspects of this game, you know where to find us.
I have a question. Last thing. Of the active, let's just go with coaches. Well, we have to go with coaches because football players are at max 22, 23 right now. Who is the best NCAA football player amongst active coaches?
Oh.
Who's going to get on the sticks and beat you?
Will Healy's pretty young. He's probably played.
Yeah, Healy?
Yeah, probably.
Are we just going by youth?
I don't know. He seems like he'd know how to do that stuff.
I feel like I've had this conversation with Brendan Marion before.
Yeah.
Wide receivers coach at Hawaii.
Pitt should hire him, by the way.
Oh my God! Could you imagine? I cannot wait until a recruit beats the fucking brakes off of a coach on an in-home visit and tweets about it or streams it directly while it's happening.
My favorite college football athlete of the last 10 years is still Cardale Jones, and I think it's in large part, one, because he made Bama cry, and two, because he beat that little cancer kid's ass in the hospital and recreated a fucking Chappelle Show skit in real life.
I forgot about that.
That happened.
That was pretty good.
Genius.
Good.
All right, folks, we'll see where this goes. It's an exciting day if you're a fan of college football, video games, or all the above, and I feel good about the prediction that we are closer to the game coming back than we are the game going away. We put out a lot of question calls this week. We asked you to send in questions. We haven't done an Ask Us CD in a while. And, gents, I was thinking we'd take, a big handful of them, maybe make a few of them into slightly longer discussions, and at some point we'll break for podcast business. Sound fair enough?
Works for me.
I love it.
Wonderful.
Okay, this one from Dan Weiner. Based on the following criteria, I thought this would be a very fun one to start with. Based on the following criteria, what is the best coaching job in college football? Decent resources, decent proximity to recruiting talent, and tempered/low expectations. I know what Godfrey's going to say because Godfrey has a niche opinion about this that he has mentioned several times. Can I just start by putting in a word for the Auburn Tigers?
Okay, what?
Low expectations. You must be talking about a different Auburn.
Low expectations.
What?
But
What?
listen.
I'm dizzy. Go ahead.
From where I sit, Auburn offers tremendous pay, fine recruiting access, expectations that are to win at some point, but really if you just take Bama's head off every couple years in Jordan Hare, they're happy with you for a year, so you get a year where everyone's singing hosannas and very excited about you. And if you get fired, which you eventually will if you don't win a national championship, and maybe even if you do, they pay very handsomely not to work. What did Gus just get paid not to work? $21-something million, half of that up front. Auburn's a tremendous job, maybe the best in America.
I like the English. Go ahead before I. Yeah, go ahead.
Before you rebut him, I'm actually going to go a different direction. I'm taking Ohio State. I think Ohio State. I know. I think Ohio State.
That is some normcore shit.
Yeah. They've never been bad. Literally, Ohio State has never been bad. They are Ohio State is truly national in a way that Notre Dame wishes they were. And, I shouldn't say that. In a way, Texas wishes they were. And in a way that Notre Dame is national, but Notre Dame is different because it's independent and it's Catholic. Ohio State is in that conference. And, you ask some people, Ohio State is the one who should have made the television network, not Texas, because of how big that program really and truly is. You're in the Big Ten. You can recruit nationally in a way that you can whoop up on the rest of the division. You have two in-division rivals who right now can't get their shit together, particularly the big one. And I don't know. I like Ohio State here.
Ohio State has a national television network. I'm sorry, I'm still terrified. I thought there already was a Fox News.
Hey-o.
So I'm still reeling from the Alex thing. Let me do my shtick first. The question has to be, you have to kind of go another layer. If we're just ranking good jobs where everyone's going to throw out the name of a perennial power with a lot of money. My question is, what do you want from your job? What do you want from your career? Because I wrote a piece in the offseason last year that said Mark Stoops in Kentucky was the best situation going in college football, and I still believe that. You can go look at the details of his deal, but basically he gets a raise every time they go to like the Music City Bowl. There's no expectation to win a national championship, and them beating Penn State in one of the directional floor. I think it was in Jacksonville or Outback. It don't matter. He's a god there. Like it's the sweetest, nicest gig in the world. He gets to walk through every high school in America with an SEC logo on his jacket. Like it's the best, in my opinion. Now, I also just wrote a piece saying that UCF.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
This is going to hurt. UCF was the best coaching opportunity in recent years to open, period, full stop, and the best opportunity for a coach in America right now, which we sort of alluded to on last week's show, talking about, like, don't fuck it up, just hire Tony Elliott. So, Alex.
Steven.
This is one of those situations where, like, I'm very proud of the younger generation because you have not adopted some of the more like nihilist habits of, because I'm on the cusp of Gen X. Like you don't smoke, right?
I don't.
And you don't smoke because you grew up with people, like you grew up with a full knowledge of what cigarettes do to you and those around you, right?
Those commercials, yeah.
Right.
That's about right.
You guys both
Although
did,
I've seen
right?
some good research by Philip Morris that suggests that it's not that big a deal.
Okay, so to that end, Alex, what fucking cancerous piece of human flesh do I need to show you that conveys to your brain that Auburn will kill you?
Yeah.
Again, I think we're going to see a picture of
Are you
Gus.
fucking
We're going to see a
crazy?
picture of Gus Malzahn within a few months, sitting on a beach.
He's gonna
with
look
a
25.
Exactly, with a floral colored drink, watching a bay or even a whole ocean, and I think that's testament to the fact that Auburn doesn't kill you; it just pays you.
No, Auburn is a
Tommy
top 10 job in
Tuberville.
college
Tommy
football.
Tuberville was a disaster by the end of his Auburn tenure. Infuriated tons of people. Went on to do a worse job somewhere else, and he's in the United States Senate right now.
Like, coaching will age you rapidly, painfully. Like having a heavy drinking and smoking habit and living in the desert. Like it is a fucking hard life for sure. It's like everybody went to Vegas forever. Like, however, Auburn will age you especially. Auburn's that planet on Inception where it's been 22 years and 5 minutes, okay?
Okay, fair.
I'm serious. Alex.
So then let me. All right. So UCF, but you've also said before that Mark Stoops has the best job. I think you said this in your UCF story at Banner Society the other day.
Yeah. Also,
you think
I just
Mark
said
Stoops?
Inception. It's Interstellar.
That's what we meant.
Go.
You think Mark Stoops has the best job in a way of anyone, at least in the power conferences? Can you
because
explain
of
that?
all that shit that I just said? Yeah, like it doesn't exist in Lexington, and Lexington's a nice town. It's a beautiful town. You get 4 seasons. Your family likes it there. You can hire pretty well because again, it's the Southeastern Conference, so your assistant salary pool. This is what I talked about with UCF. Assistant salary pool is becoming a really important stat. Assistant salary pool when we're talking about like should Tom Herman take LSU or Texas? Like, or when we should, like, what job should Billy Napier take? I'm telling y'all, assistant salary pool is going to be a very important number as we move forward and try and understand these things. So, that Auburn take. Y'all, do you know that Arthur Smith, like the new Falcons head coach, is my age? He looks 50.
He looks
fucking 50.
Yeah.
My guy has gone total salt. My guy's carrying at least 35 that he shouldn't.
Man,
okay?
why?
And it's a 35 all over.
Why would he work this hard? Isn't he the heir?
Alex.
Isn't he the heir of
Yes,
FedEx?
Alex, the fate of my favorite sports franchise rests on the shoulders of a man who, at any moment in time, unlike 99.9999% of the world, could just be like, hey, you know what? Oh, fuck this. I'm a billionaire.
If Arthur Blank is going to try to fire him, and he'll be like, fire me? How about I buy this team right off your hands?
Fred Smith could buy that team.
Yes.
Like, I mean, it's so weird. It's just, it's just.
I don't get it. How did Arthur Blank make his money again?
Home Depot.
So somehow his head coach is the heir to a larger business than the one he started. That has to be.
I mean,
that has to be a first.
To an extent, I think Arthur Smith's dad is one of the reasons why Home Depot works, given it fulfills shipping, logistics, et cetera, et cetera.
Damn. Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah. Seriously. I mean, I hope Arthur Smith works hard and does his best. But geez, I mean, if I were in his position, I don't know if I would put up with being a football coach. Anyway, a couple questions I want to take together here. A.N. Gregory on Twitter asked or pointed out, we talk about how we, quote, need USC to be good to anchor the sport on the West Coast. Asks if Clay Helton is a couple assistants away from dominance or if they need a fresh start. I think we have broad consensus on this podcast that they'll need a fresh start sooner than later. But I want to take this with a broader Pac-12 question because I think they are closely intertwined as we talk about what USC actually needs going forward. The question from Delingus Butter on Twitter was, what should or what can the new Pac-12 commissioner do to help the conference regain national relevance? Well, I think the short answer is that they have to get their television deal right. And the long answer is that they got the last one very, very, very wrong. I think the way in which they particularly did this, Godfrey, you stopped me at which point, at whichever point I explained something in a way that you wouldn't. But remember back in 2011, Richard and I are very young. Godfrey was younger. The Pac-12 signs a very long-term deal. I think a 12-term deal, 12-year deal, 12 years a term with ESPN and Fox. And this is a $3 billion deal. Very, very big at the time. Hey, great. This is the most money that's ever changed hands in a college sports TV agreement. A few things happen that show that this was a significant miscalculation by the Pac-12. Number one, the Big Ten and SEC come along and they sign bigger TV deals. So the Pac-12 starts falling behind in this arms race of college football money. Remember when in 2012, the Big Ten goes and gets Rutgers and Maryland, and everyone's like, whoa, Rutgers, Maryland? No, what the Big Ten was really after was New York City metro area and the DC metro area, and they got it. And the Big Ten is in most homes in this region, that it might not have otherwise been in. The second thing that happens is a year before. I'm kind of out of order, but remember when the Pac-12 was making this TV deal, it also launches its own TV network. Godfrey, can you explain for the people the big difference in terms of ownership structure and why it matters between the Pac-12's TV network and the Big Ten's TV network?
You left off an S. It's Pac-12 Networks.
Excuse me.
That's where you can start.
Man, yeah. So, all right, here's what I'm going to do. This is a layered topic, and it's close to my heart for some reason because I have zero connection to the West. But I'm going to give myself time limits every time you ask me to answer this. The reason why the network is a problem is that it's completely owned, operated, and therefore funded and paid for by the conference itself. That means it's taking money directly out of the pockets of the member university specifically. This has pissed off, historically, the schools further away from the Bay Area, but Larry Scott always had the support of a couple key presidents and chancellors who had a bigger level of influence in the Pac-12 than maybe that what happened in the SEC. They launched multiple networks. They operated it themselves. The reason why that's a problem, one is money, which I just said. Two is leverage. They don't have leverage with carriage providers. DirecTV was a famous
They're
battle.
still not on DirecTV.
Right. YouTube TV now, Hulu, whatever you guys use for your live. I mean, most of us are doing that OTT streaming thing, but I covered this extensively as the transition occurred at SB Nation, and I covered this as the transition occurred while I was at SB. Anyway. Dealing with the Pac-12 isn't as scary as dealing with ESPN. The reason why the SEC and the ACC have saddled up next to ESPN and Texas as well is that ESPN can exercise leverage over cable providers and satellite providers. When you're just dealing with the Pac-12, it's much easier to say, no thanks, fuck off. We're not going to raise our rates by $1.80 or whatever it is to get you guys that extra change in your pocket. So now you're left with a network that's networks, thank you, Richard, that are very, very expensive to operate. You're operating it from the probably, I think now, per square footage, the most expensive city to operate from in America, and you're not making near as much revenue. This is all because of third-tier rights. Third-tier rights were all absorbed by the SEC network and ESPN. They turned that into a buku ton of money. Your third-tier rights in the Pac-12, nada.
Nope.
This is why they're falling behind.
And it's also the reason, not just why they're falling behind, great explanation, but why a lot of people cannot watch their games. Now, this is funny when it's me making a joke on Twitter. Actually, it might not be funny. You tell me. But it's at least mildly bemusing to some when someone on the East Coast is trying to watch Oregon State and Arizona State at 1:45 a.m. Eastern, and you're like, wow, this is a great ending. I can't watch it because it's on the Pac-12 networks, and nobody gets the Pac-12 networks. But it's a real problem for Pac-12 fan bases who might have DirecTV in their homes, or who might, for some other reason, be unable to get that channel without bending over backwards. It results in less visibility for the conference, particularly for its kind of middle tier. That's not your USCs and not your Oregons, because those teams aren't going to have a lot of games relegated to the Pac-12 networks. And so you have kind of a dual problem here of exposure and money that is brought on by the fact that you created your own TV network, unlike the Big Ten, which partnered up with Fox, and like you mentioned, the SEC, the ACC with ESPN. So you're responsible for all of it.
Personally, I think that's the way you should run a network, but that's just me.
I do. I totally agree. And you just have dueling problems for yourself. I think that the Pac-12 has another chance at this in 2024. They're going to be even further behind the Big Ten and the SEC by then, because the SEC just signed a huge deal with Disney that starts right around then. The Big Ten, its current deal with Fox and ESPN is up a year before that. So, you've seen things like, Michigan State needs a coach and it's late in the cycle, so they're just going to throw more money at Colorado's coach than Colorado can possibly match. That kind of thing will keep happening. And what does the Pac-12 commissioner have to do about it? Needs to absolutely stick the landing with the next TV deal. I don't know if that just means killing the Pac-12 networks altogether. They've already laid off most of their staff while Larry Scott and his top execs were taking serious bonuses. So great work, Larry. But I don't know if it means shuttering that, jettisoning the whole operation, and just trying to squeeze everything out of the networks, the other networks. I don't know if it is trying to put your games on Apple TV or TikTok or Netflix. I have no idea. You might as well try to figure something out that leverages the relationships that you have because of where you're located. Because, again, Larry Scott put you in the most expensive real estate district in the world. By the way, they fired Larry Scott, by the way.
Yeah, they fired.
Yeah, just to be
Scott.
Kind of.
He's leaving. Anyway, I don't know.
I want to get
Godfrey,
fired where I get to work.
Yeah.
I want to get fired where I work for 6 more months doing basically nothing, and then they give me like a huge fat.
Yeah.
Severance.
Again, Larry Scott has done a bad job and gotten paid very well for it. So congratulations, Larry.
I will say this: at the time when Larry Scott was hired, it all made sense. I know that sounds insane.
It just hasn't aged well at all.
That CEO model made sense for where they were at the time, and they were ambitious, and I applaud them for that. I wrote some stories at the time where they were thinking differently. They were trying to be less tribal. I think all of that's good for college sports. Also, I will say this: Pac-12 did the best job and the most honest and transparent job during COVID of the Power Five, flat out. Full
Sure.
stop. No one did a great job. Pac-12 did the least shitty. How's that?
I would give them that.
Here's the problem, Alex. Your question. Did it say the Pac-12 or did it say the Pac-12 network?
It said the Pac-12 commissioner. What does the Pac-12 commissioner have to do? The next one.
So this is a huge problem in the media right now. Is we fixate on that network and it's become a punching bag, and as it should because of everything we just said, right? There's a very clear and sort of unsexy answer as to what you actually have to do. You're stuck with some of these contracts, some of these pieces of real estate, and you're stuck with the financial deficiencies. You have to overcome that in a couple different ways. One, you need to get Clay Helton the flying fuck out of Heritage Hall. Number one, okay? Number two, you need to find someone who can fucking coach USC. Number three, you need to find someone who can fucking recruit to USC, okay? Specifically what I mean by that is you have to stop the drain. And the drain right now, there's a wonderful socioeconomic conversation we can have for 35 fucking minutes that we've already had on the show before about why middle-class America is abandoning California, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What is the future of the sport in a culture that doesn't support football? Just keep your fucking Bryce Youngs from going to Alabama. Let's just start there, okay? Like, I mean, that's a much simpler way to solve this problem. So let's start there. Let's make a fence. Mario Cristobal in Oregon, they're doing it right now. Jimmy Lake has to be real shit at Washington. Anecdotally, I caught like 4 Washington bullets this week just shooting the shit with coaches, and everyone's like, that's the one that like, I don't even remember the anecdote, but like that's the one program that always like talks its way into the conversation about being a major power. But it's like, what the fuck do they have to show for it? They won the Pac-12 once, and Alabama turned them into dust. Like anybody can have that done to them. You need Oregon and Washington to be legit. You can't have Stanford carrying the water up there, but just because the weird private school can't be the bellwether. You have to have a consumer-driven school with rank-and-file sidewalk fans. You have to have USC being fucking USC. It would be nice if UCLA was a competent foil. Boom, you have 4 teams. By the way, I haven't mentioned Arizona yet. And I'm just talking about football right now. I'm not talking about the television contracts and DirecTV. Hey, man, get some good football. That's it. Let Herm Edwards cook. I mean, have 4 or 5 competent football programs, and you will be amazed at how fast people notice on a national level. I can filibuster about this. It starts there. It's not just USC, but the Trojans have to be a part of it.
Yeah, USC in 2005 was a cultural icon. Like that team, fucking Snoop Dogg was on the sideline. Like when USC is
standing
good,
next to Will Ferrell, who had the #1 movie in America, and he's out there giving pep talk. That's true shit, y'all. Look it up.
And and people, I don't think people, I don't want to be sort of I'm old or older than the current generation, but like when I was 12, 13, 14, like USC was it, bruh. Mm-hmm. And the Lakers were good. Like Shaq and Kobe were still there. And USC was a massive deal. Now, I understand they didn't have an NFL team at the time, but if USC gets good, USC is a different type of deal than the Rams are, even if Matt Stafford wins the Super Bowl. It's just
it's not even close. It's not even close. The only thing that's bigger than USC in Los Angeles is a World Series winning Dodger team, okay, which has happened, and the Lake Show. And that's it. I know, like even when you're third in the second largest market in America, you're first in every damn thing else.
Right, exactly.
Y'all got to understand how USC owns that city. UCLA basketball did like before I was cognizant of sports.
Yeah.
Okay. It's amazing to see how far it's fallen.
Speaking of ownership, Home Field Apparel owns some of the best collegiate apparel this side of I don't know
any river.
Now that Jeff Bezos is stepping aside from Amazon, I look forward to Connor becoming the new future trillionaire of e-commerce. You should contribute to that by going to homefieldapparel.com. Promo code SZD, 20% off of your first order from Homefield. You probably won't be able to get sad dog joggers, something that I am still a little bit annoyed about. You probably can't tell. Alex, Big News Saturday is coming back. Do we have a date on that yet?
Big News Saturday is coming back?
From what I am to understand, Big News Saturday is
This is a thrill. I actually did not realize that we were getting back into the schedule. I will say that they released a new school this past either Friday or Saturday, which is Temple, and they achieved something that I didn't think was, from my vantage growing up in Pittsburgh, entirely possible, which is they made Temple cool. Like, this is a great Temple selection. The owl looks appropriately menacing. Temple's colors look like, in a way, I think more like loud and exciting on these retro designs than they do on Temple's like actual football uniforms. I've been by Temple a few times when I've been in Philadelphia, but like I've never thought of Temple. I kind of think of it like Michigan State myself. I'm like, all right, Temple, you're there. You've run a solid football program. There's a lot that you do that is impressive. You seem to beat teams that have more stature in the sport, and you make it look easy. But you're not widely regarded as cool. I think that may be changing now because Temple just looks like I need to we'll call this the shirt of the week. It's this owl with its hands on its hips on a gray tee just staring at you. And I think owls are probably the scariest animal that could be looking at you face to face. Would there be any disagreement with that other than like a large jungle cat that's like sizing you up?
I'm sure it could.
Yeah, so it's a great collection. Like Temple honestly looks cool as hell here, which home field has done this with Temple. They've done it with Michigan State. They've done it with Florida State, which is hard right now. So props to you guys, Home Field Apparel.
Promo code SZD, 20% off of your first order. RIP John Chaney, the legend. Rob the Fourth on Twitter, I think, or Discord, can't remember.
Twitter, I think.
Twitter, okay. Richard, any thoughts on the new Florida QB and defensive backs coach? I will do this quickly. Honestly, look, as much as Todd Grantham is a meme, the pressure packages, all that kind of stuff, that stuff works if Florida has better and smarter defensive back play over the last couple of years. That is what they have not had. That's the thing that needs to change. I think that is why, more or less, Todd Grantham was brought back. I think Dan is kind of giving him a little bit more runway and a little bit carte blanche to get that stuff figured out. Wesley McGriff comes from Auburn to be a defensive backs coach. Remember, he helped develop Noah Igbonagani. God, I am bad with that name. From a wide receiver to a first-round defensive back. Jules Mortimer is the other defensive backs coach who's coming over from USF. So that is, we will see if the DBs can play. That defense is going to be better. The other one with regards to the quarterback coach, Florida promoted Garrett McGee from analyst to replace Brian Johnson. I think that this sort of flies under the radar. Florida has a very diverse coaching staff. I think there's only 3 white guys on it. And they've now gone back-to-back black quarterback coaches. And as we know, quarterback coach is sort of route one to being offensive coordinator and then head coach in a sport that is obsessed with offense. Garrett McGee is an analyst who was promoted up. That is one of the, I guess, success stories, if you want to call it, about having talented former coordinators or position coaches just in your analyst pool so you can do something quickly like this. Garrett McGee doesn't have to come in and learn terminology or whatever. He's already been in the building. He already knows the personnel, all that kind of stuff. I think McGee has interesting influences on him. He coached with Bobby Petrino at a couple stops, and he's coached multiple different things in the passing side. He's coached wide receivers. He's been a coordinator, all that kind of stuff. So interesting the way Florida's going that way, and Dan Mullen making that decision.
Garrett McGee, former head coach where?
UAB.
Correct.
Also, Florida has a diverse coaching staff in that some of their assistants are good at their jobs, and then there's Todd Grantham. Godfrey.
Go Gators.
Go Gators.
Yeah, the man salt is pure. It's better than mine.
Godfrey, Will Dunn on Twitter asked, is this year make or break for Ed Orgeron at LSU? If so, what does it take for him to fall on the right side of that line?
I think we also had a question about Kirby and Hot Seat.
We did.
And so,
we did. Yeah.
Those are weird polls, sort of, to, like, address. I'll put them together.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Hot Seat for Kirby would be a disastrous thing. In other words, like, my thumbnail opinion on the entire situation at Georgia is no one has shown me a modern offense. Okay, there was like this weird argument I intercepted on Twitter.
It's there. You got to watch the last couple games of the season.
Okay, all right, but it's not there yet. Inklings, promise, all that. That's the Georgia way. Don't tell me about shit in December that's going to happen in September. Okay, because that's about as Clark County as shit can get. So I want to know specifically this year, if it comes out of the gate against Clemson and it is successful, because I do believe it has been the Achilles heel of Kirby's program, I'll leave it at that. A hot seat situation would just be implosion 7-5 type nonsense with the combination of a less than stellar recruiting class, or maybe recruiting affected by going something like 7-5. I think that's the only situation you're going to get at there. Expectation for Georgia this year is to compete for and win the SEC title, full stop. Go to Atlanta and beat Alabama.
They have to make the playoff. They have to make the playoff. I'm not saying they have to make the playoff or Kirby gets fired or something. I think that is where it is.
My Georgia-born clairvoyance tells me exactly how they will miss the playoff in the most exceedingly Georgia way possible, which is that Alabama will drub their ass out in Atlanta after they beat Clemson. And there'll be this big contentious, like, SEC network. This feels like something Peter Burns would tweet late in the year. Shout out. That like a Georgia team that beat Clemson, who went on to win all of its games, should belong in the playoff. Like, yeah, I could see that shit happening. So, yeah, you got to make the playoff, but I just, I think at the very minimum you have to win the division. I think that's fair to say. So moving on to the LSU side is this. I don't know where I've said this. I think I've said it here. What we are dealing with at LSU, no hyperbole, is we're one loss away. And I don't know what the schedule is in front of me, but we're one loss away in 2021, whenever that loss comes, of those who make the decisions in Baton Rouge and thereabouts on I-10 and I-12, from Ed Orgeron standing being exactly where it was before the undefeated national title season that ended 14 months
What a
ago.
fucking business.
This is the quickest eclipse I have ever seen in my career, and I am old enough to say I've been doing this for a minute. Go
I
ahead.
have a follow-up. I know that they tried to hire this guy Ryan Nielsen, who works for the Saints. Have you ever seen a situation like this? And is my read of it correct, where a state's pro team basically plays hardball and says, "Fuck you, no, you can't promote our assistants and hire them to your staff"? Has this ever happened before? Is it as weird as it seems to me?
Fine. All right. God, Alex, fine. Ow, you're pulling my arm. I'll spill some tea.
There it is.
Those two institutions don't particularly like
Doesn't seem like it. Doesn't seem like it.
It's not a hand-holding thing.
So are they pissed? Are they pissed because is Peyton pissed because O hires Joe Brady and now Joe Brady's in Peyton's division? Is that?
Well, I think what's interesting, what's always been interesting.
Wait, hang on. You can't ascribe ownership. Like Peyton is not going to say Orgeron is responsible for Brady being in Carolina.
So why do they not like each other? Because there's clearly some.
All I know is I get major tread and major fucking troll points every single time an LSU player does some shit to a Saint in the NFL, such as a young man named Devin White picking off some old noodle-armed asshole to end his playoff run and potentially his pro career 2 weeks ago in the Superdome. I don't know any more hints I can give. This happens consistently. LSU players show up the Saints all the time. There is a weird, circular amount of bad blood where it's it's a tit for tat thing. They don't love each other. I'm just telling you, they don't. And what's really weird is, if y'all remember, Ed was Sean's D-line coach after his college career had valleyed. So it's not an Ed versus Sean thing. I'm not trying to spread that out there. I'm just saying organizationally what you're getting is two programs that are competing to be the most loved thing in a very insular culture.
That is, I think, it. Because in
Yes.
in a lot of the other NFL cities that you can think of, the college team, and I know obviously New Orleans and Baton Rouge are not in the same city, but might as well be.
They might as well be.
There is the college team is very clearly a step under the college team is very clearly a step under the pro team, besides maybe Miami. In Atlanta, the Falcons are clearly different than Georgia Tech.
No, it's Georgia. No, yeah, that's fine to say. So yeah,
and then there's Georgia there. In LA, there wasn't even an NFL team for a long time. You know what I mean? In San Francisco, Stanford's not comparing with either of the Bay Area teams. It's just not like that. Seattle and Washington, it's not like that.
We can pick this back up in the summer when things are really slow, but there's also a thing about New Orleans versus the world. Like, you see those T-shirts. New Orleans is not Louisiana. Louisiana is not New Orleans. And New Orleans and Louisiana rarely agree on a lot. And that has a lot to do with this, okay? I'll leave it at that because I can go on this subject.
Fair enough. I want to keep it in New Orleans for a second. I want to ask about a coach at a school that had a chance, I would argue, once upon a time to be LSU level in that state, but then
literally forgot Tulane was in New Orleans.
And Tulane, back in the 30s and 40s, was on the path to being very, very big time in football until the president of the school decided that they did not want to be a football factory. And Huey Long always backed those. which they left the SEC, of course, before it became exactly what it is today. But yeah, Tulane had that opportunity and passed it up. The question here from Mike on Twitter, and we'll try to keep these a little shorter going forward so we can get through more questions before we're done, is the main reason Willie Fritz is still there. Is the main reason Willie Fritz is still at Tulane his record, the wins losses, and how difficult would it be to get a fan base excited about him? Like, has he not gotten another job because he doesn't give a great quote, or because he's not a guy who would quote unquote win the press conference? Like, why is he still at Tulane?
I'll do it real fast. I don't think the right job for him is open necessarily. I think the record has affected it. His age is a deterrent to a lot of athletic directors, fair or not. And also, you're talking about a pretty sizable transition in offensive philosophy, because you just saw Will Hall, who kind of re-engineered that turnaround after they were basically a gun triple team when he was at Georgia Southern. He brings that to Tulane. They move away. What was talked about, I think Richard and I had this conversation with coaches one year at convention, was that they moved away from Doug Roos, the OC at the time, who's now back at OCing Georgia Southern, was specifically so Willie Fritz could get more of a look on a national level for these jobs. By virtue of where he's from in America, I think like it's not going to happen now, because Matt Campbell has just turned Iowa State into something I've never expected Iowa State to be. He would have been perfect for a pre-Matt Campbell Iowa State. He would have been perfect at Kansas State. I still believe that. I think he'd be great at Kansas State. I think once Les Miles and Jeff Long are done fucking up Lawrence, Kansas, he might be good at Kansas. That may be the only option they have. So I think it's a combination of a lot of factors right now. I think he's a very good fit for Tulane. I think they need to stick with him.
Well, now that Mike DeBoer is in as offensive coordinator at Kansas, that could be on the upswing.
Holy crap.
Anyway,
I just saw that. I saw that right before the show, and I just wanted my reaction to be on the audio.
Yeah. Highway of the Cool Zone, also on Twitter. We have some Discords coming up. Says Pat Narduzzi is under contract through 2024 at Pitt, which, yeah, he is. Through 6 seasons, he has put up at least 5 losses every year. What is the end game here, and when is it happening? I think 2 possible end games. The likeliest is this drags for a little while, like another year or 2 without much progress, and then Pitt makes a change. I think that buyout is, if not prohibitive for them right now, at least such that they're not eager. And because they've played at, frankly, a non-embarrassing level, they've been mediocre-ish for the last few years. I don't think that there's a ton of heat right now. I could argue that there should be more, given the way he has run that offense with Mark Whipple at the helm, and some of his game management decisions. So I think one option is that when the buyout gets slightly less prohibitive, that ends, and Pitt targets perhaps a Joe Moorhead, Yinzer, to come in and be their football coach. The other option that might be best for everyone involved is if, like, an NFL team wants a defensive coordinator, Pat Narduzzi would be an awesome NFL defensive coordinator. I think there is little question that he'd be really, really good at that, because one thing he can do is scheme up a defense that is better than the sum of its parts. Just hasn't figured out the offense. He has a 5th-year quarterback coming back next year. If it doesn't happen then, sheesh. Like, I think it's really a show me something kind of year, and that feels weird to say in a 7th year on a job, but yeah.
I predict a journey. And the journey is this. They're going to go into Neyland and win that game in week 2, and then they may just absolutely get walloped in their own conference.
It could happen.
So what do you do with that? I think Pitt is going to be in another it's another year limbo is my prediction. The interest in that job it's kind of all over the map. I don't know. I don't know. We're moving fast, so I'll ask you more questions about Pitt in the offseason.
I'm excited.
I'm curious what. I just want to know what the value ceiling is on that.
I agree with you. It's an interesting question. There are significant pros and cons to that job, and it just hasn't been open in a while, so we haven't talked about it. In 2022, their first 2 weeks are home against West Virginia, renewal of the brawl, home against Tennessee, RIP to the parking lots outside Heinz Field when that happens. Bob Loblaw on Twitter says that someone had brought this question up before, but is curious, and Godfrey, I want to target this one to you. When coaches who are in this very high turnover industry take a new job, do they rent houses? Do they buy? Is it like a show of stability to show recruits that you bought a house? Like, what is this dynamic of coach housing?
So, when they first get the gig?
Yeah.
When they first get the gig, they're in fucking apartments because
Yeah,
their wives and
Wait,
kids
I don't know. Say
come
like
until
say like
May
6 months
when-
in.
So multiple, I think what Richard is implying is that we know of multiple coaching staffs who got the jobs in around Christmas, whatever. First thing you're gonna do with wives and kids is the kids are gonna finish out school year.
Yeah, so they don't come over till
Guess
May.
what? So they ain't gonna move until May and buy houses. Probably start looking in the market around July or August. The wives, I'm not trying to sound a
I
certain
was
way.
going
I'm
to say
telling
it.
you
I
what
was going
happens.
to say it if you didn't say it. So go
No,
ahead.
I'm just saying the wives do all that. The wives, it is a very 1950s dynamic, less about misogyny, more about necessity in that regard, because these guys are just never home. I've heard stories before where guys have walked in and been like, "Oh, this is an entire room of this house I've never been in, or we've owned this house for a year and I haven't sat." I've heard those stories before where it's just it's alien to them. What happens at first, to answer the question, is they usually just get temporary housing. Richard and I know specifically of a couple staffs where they turned it into an animal house type situation.
Yes.
Where the new head coach was like, all right, my wife won't get here either. I'm going to rent a 5-bedroom house and all you dirtbags come live with me, which has, its pros and its cons, definitely, because I heard anecdotally that towards the end of that animal house spell, that shit's not as fun when you're old. And I think everybody was ready to see their families again and get away from each other.
That would make sense. Someone had asked us what is going on with the Atlantic Sun and the WAC, obviously two non-FBS conferences. Are they really trying to go and play FBS football eventually? How would they do
Some of
that?
them are.
Some of them are. I don't think that in general the ASUN and the WAC are trying to play FBS football, but I think it's still interesting.
I would disagree with that. I think there is a pipe dream where you can get enough of them to try to go up that you could potentially get a charter to be an FBS league. I do not think
That would be fascinating.
That is out of the realm of possibility.
Stay tuned.
All right, stay tuned.
When I said FCS realignment was coming a couple weeks ago.
Here's the quick background.
Dad's cooking something, guys. Dad's cooking something.
Well, I'm excited.
I got to do it low and slow, okay?
So here's what's publicly known now, so you can draw your own conclusions while you wait for Godfrey to fill you in more. The ASUN is moving into the FCS football business. They are adding Central Arkansas, Jacksonville State, and Eastern Kentucky. They already have, for most sports, Kennesaw State and North Alabama, who are ASUN schools that have been playing football in a timeshare with the Big South. Matt Brown at Extra Points has covered this. It does seem like the ASUN is planning to play with a 5-team league in 2021, but there is an idea that they have put forward that they have apparently talked about some with the WAC, which is also coming back as a football league, that they might make an airplane conference, because right now a 5-team league in the ASUN, that's not enough. You need 6 for a playoff auto bid. I think the WAC currently has 7. They've been poaching like crazy from the Southland. They grabbed 4 teams out of Texas and the Southland, and Matt's reported that they have talked about joining up. So it's going to be interesting to watch. Also, the Southland is Big East circa 2012 vibes. Not a good situation in the Southland, and I think that's proven by the fact that a bunch of schools from the Southland that are in Texas looked at their budgetary situations and decided, yeah, we want to pay for travel to go play our road games in the WAC rather than stay in the Southland. So, yeah.
The future is coming. The future, this time, the last time the future came to college football, it started at the top. And this time when the future comes to college football, it's going to start at the bottom.
It's exciting. Can't wait to see it happen. Michael Urbanowicz asked, how do y'all think college football will change due to the weirdness of the 2020 season? Or does it just go back to normal and forget 2020 ever happened?
Most of the latter. I think the roster weirdness is going to be... The roster weirdness will take a little bit to rinse out. That is the one thing that we may be left with for another year or two. But besides that, don't bet on things in college sports changing quickly. Last year's little malleability was cute, but I do not think that will continue. I mean, we're already still scheduling bye games for 2035.
It's a fair point.
They're going to try and return it. They're going to try to return it to its previous state as much as possible for financial reasons. Take that for what it's worth, but I do think you'll see a couple small things change. That's a fast answer.
Evan Knox asks, who do y'all think will get a Power 5 job first, Seth Luttrell or Jeff Traylor? Well, that's a fun question. I think that they're obviously going in different directions. Their programs are right now, but I'm inclined to say Luttrell because he has been a high-level Power 5 assistant before, whereas I would actually love to have Jeff Traylor on the show. He might be the coach who I would be most interested in interviewing, but it kind of feels, we talked about UTSA at length, like that might just be a like, this guy's got to be a group of 5 head coach in Texas type vibe. Like this is where you get the most value add out of a guy like that is at a group of 5 program in Texas. That's why you hire a legendary high school Texas football coach. I don't know. Godfrey, you're shaking.
Why am I not an agent? Why am I not an agent? Because here's
we're
what I'm
gonna start a search firm in like 3 or 4 years.
I told all y'all that a 2-10 head coach at a shit program in Northeast Ohio was the next hot thing. His name is Sean Lewis. He went 7-6 and 3-1 in COVID. I'm telling you right now, get on that trailer. Hitch that trailer.
Wow, that's just tremendous wordplay.
I'm telling you right now that what that dude's doing at UTSA is not getting noticed. And as we slog through the offseason, you're going to see more of my more like mainstream colleagues figure out like, oh, fuck, like, wow, UTSA is doing things they shouldn't. And they're going to start asking why. That guy has figured some shit out.
And we already know.
I want the delta points that come with our search firm in the future.
Yeah, it'll be a ton of fun.
They're going on my credit card.
No, you're not working in a search firm in New York City. Move south where football is.
Buddy, it's 2 hours to Atlanta.
Fair enough. Daniel Woods asks, is the industry opinion of West Virginia coach Neil Brown so much higher than the public's that he was a serious candidate for SEC jobs this year? What is West Virginia's ceiling with Neil Brown? I don't know. My opinion of him is that he's a pretty good coach.
Everybody seen Ted Lasso, or is that just me?
That's just you.
I've seen Ted Lasso. I enjoyed it. It's better than you'd think.
It's ridiculously good.
Yeah.
It has absolutely no business being that good. Neil Brown is of that vein, so if you know, you know on the Ted Lasso reference. But Neil Brown is the best at being steady and consistent in every way, shape, and form. And when you go to do a profile on Neil Brown, as I have, you don't come away with anything that you feel like is a lead graph or anything that's like sexy or anything that's like you would put in the social teas, as we say in the digital media business. It's like there's nothing that's going to reach out and grab you when the story comes out. But then you go back and listen to your interview 6-7 months later, and you're like, oh, this guy has stripped all of the bluster out of being a college football head coach. He is the anti, like, hot hire, holy shit. And he's just the most consistent guy, calm and thoughtful guy in the room. And it's boring, but it is going to be slowly effective, just like it was at Troy. Just like, I mean, I fully expect it. Now, the bigger and more important part of this question, Alex, is they're asking about ceilings at West Virginia. Can we all admit now that nobody leaves a Power 5 conference? Like, you don't do that. But damn, like, if there's another round of realignment and, like, Cincinnati ends up in the ACC or something like that, West Virginia is just, this is, I think as the decades wear on, man, West Virginia in the Big 12 it's just tough. It's just not a good fit.
Well, geographically, West Virginia is maybe the single most obvious tweener in the whole Power 5.
Yeah.
And the loss of the Big East and Pitt being in the ACC makes that even more acute. Like Pitt, Pitt is an ACC school because Pittsburgh has 3 rivers and rivers have coastlines. But West Virginia is like, it's only an hour and a half, but it's like, and it's actually, it's more southern than Pittsburgh. But West Virginia is just kind of hanging on there, and it is a little incongruous that they are.
It's 1,000 miles to your nearest rival in your conference. 1,000 miles to Kansas.
And that's Kansas. Although they have a decent basketball series, or at least they have at different points since West Virginia's been that league. Fair enough. Abrasive Obelisk on Discord asks if I could please break down what Mike Loxley has done at Maryland. Answer is he's recruited well, which I think people figured he would do. And let's see where it takes us. I've seen this movie before. DJ Durkin recruited pretty well at Maryland. Turned out to be a horrific leader of that program, and it didn't work out very well. So let's see. But I am cautiously optimistic that things might be improving.
Got to develop them, too.
Absolutely. Jean-Luc on Discord asked if we think that an offense will win a national title anytime in the future, near or otherwise, where the offense is not built around the RPO. It's been a bit since that's happened. Richard?
Yeah, because they've been in the games. Like, it's not like they haven't been in the games. Ohio State ran counter down Oregon's ass. Georgia was Georgia, and that game went to overtime. Alabama, I would argue Alabama didn't run the ball enough with Bo Scarborough.
Wait. Which was what was the last offense to run a non-RPO national title winner?
I mean, you could say it was LSU with as much five wide receiver empty stuff.
Yeah,
as
you're
they
right.
did.
There's more gun there. Yeah, that's fair.
And,
so there you go.
And if Ohio State would have won, Ohio State wasn't doing a ton of that stuff either. So it's a bit of an oversimplification. I get it. At some point in time, they must change the rule with offensive linemen getting down the field. It's literally absurd.
Oklahoma?
Well, they're very RPO. They're both a counter team and an RPO team.
That's what I'm saying. But there's entire blocks of Oklahoma that aren't that, right?
Sure. Yeah. I don't think it's very out of the realm of possibility. But I do think that they must change the rule, the RPO rule, where offensive linemen are allowed to go 3 to 5 yards down the field past the line of scrimmage. It's cheating. It's cheating.
I mean, it's bad. It is. Yeah. It's not just something I laugh at defensive coordinators for saying, although it is funny.
Alex S. in Discord asked kind of a mega big picture question, as he puts it. In what ways do we think the changing of the climate might directly impact college football in the next 20 to 25 years? This is a quick answer, and we could probably talk about this for a while. The thing I'm most curious about is how it affects the people who bankroll college football programs. There are certain programs whose financial fortunes, either because of state funding or because of who their biggest boosters are, whose fortunes are somewhat tied to the price of certain commodities like oil. And I'm not even obviously this is
that's a meme.
No, I want to be clear. This is a meme. Like everyone says, right, the price of crude goes up. That means A&M can afford to fire a coach now. It's not that simple. It's not that simple.
That's a meme? Boys, that's a meme.
But it isn't totally made up. And I think that at a place like Oklahoma State, where the state government's tax base, revenue base is closely tracking to the price of oil, as we move to renewables, I don't know, doesn't seem like anyone's working too terribly hard to make that happen. You wonder what that means for those types of programs, those types of boosters. Is some Pac-12 alum going to have some major solar breakthrough and become a solar tycoon, and suddenly Oregon State or someone is going to just be swimming in it? That would be fun.
I am very curious about what boosters look like when we're 50.
Oh my god!
I am very curious. Some guy at Florida State is going to make an app.
It's going to be tech and finance guys.
Yes,
are going to.
He's going to be.
Yeah.
Okay. Hit a little bit of pause here. You have to have you have to have the emotional and ideological connection to college football to then translate your money, because just because you make a lot of money in tech doesn't mean that you want to be a booster for a college football team.
Well, that's why I said Florida State. That's why I use sort of
zing. The reason being, and also we've seen instances before, like at Oklahoma State, where dumping money can push you to a certain limit, but then eventually you hit a wall. There's a couple thoughts here. One, Wall Street Journal this morning had a report, kind of like a hip shot analysis of the economic recovery since the pandemic was basically accepted in late March of last year. Oil and energy specifically, oil, gas, and the energy sector are by far the slowest to recover, and they have the most ground that they need to regain. That does specifically affect Texas A&M and Texas and those people. It does, for sure. I agree with that wholeheartedly. As far as the environmental impact and things like that, we can go a lot of places. SI did a kind of really interesting story about this 10 years ago. If you remember the cover of it, was very iconic. It was Dontrell Willis standing on a pitcher's mound in Miami, except that he was up to his knees in water. And it was sort of a foreboding look at what the environmental side of this would look like. Now, where the money comes from, gentlemen, I applaud you, is the smarter take, because it will have more of an immediate and long-term effect. I don't know. I think the oil and gas thing, it's not hyperbolic to say this. It would break the back of the Big 12, and it would do so in a way faster than I think people realize. Because if you don't make money directly off the energy sector in Texas and Oklahoma, you make money off of a business that is like a sucker eel to the energy industry in those parts of the country. Sure. Houston is a great example of this. So, yeah, you're damn right. Anecdotally, my father-in-law moved his business when oil crashed in the 80s. He's a dentist. He moved it from an oil-rich area, an oil industry-centric area of Louisiana further north. So, like, these things have a cascade effect. I want to throw one last thing in here. Michigan football, maybe Michigan State football. Everybody see what GM did this week? If you want to apply that to college football,
Electric
admissions
cars.
free by 35.
Yeah.
What's that world going to look like?
Yeah, and I do wonder, so in 20, 30 years, like banking, people are going to make a shitload of money from banking forever. So does that mean Charlotte? Does that mean North Carolina? Like Georgia Tech in Georgia, does the money shift a little bit to an entertainment baron? Like, does Tyler Perry's kid become the biggest Georgia Tech booster that there is? I don't know. I'm just spitballing, but spitballing.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating, and we could probably go for a long time on that. Godfrey, you told me you had a hard out 2 minutes ago. Can I trouble you for one more quickie before you get out of here?
Let's go.
All right.
Yeah, I'm good. Okay, we can do one more.
Renardo from Ann Arbor in our Discord asked a question that I've thought about myself, and our research into the Simple Seven didn't figure this one out for me. How is it that every other big-time program has had at least minor accusations, as in ones that have been written up by the NCAA, of quote-unquote cheating, but Alabama has not? Is Nick Saban simply the greatest bagman wrangler there is, or something else?
Okay.
I actually do wonder about this.
You're like, let me hit you with a quickie on the way out.
Right, I know.
Calculus. That's not true. Bo Davis, if you go look up, Bo Davis was fired.
He did.
Immediately. Yeah. I mean, can we just do a cliffhanger for next week? Because
I think we should.
All right, cliffhanger for next week.
I have a Godfrey's
It's not
DMs.
entirely true.
I have a Godfrey's DMs that's tangentially about this too, so
we'll leave it at that.
Not
we'll just
entirely
say
true.
We'll
yes.
we'll just say for now that Alabama's players go there because they like the campus, because they think the curriculum is strong.
Tuscaloosa is beautiful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
16-year-old black kid from Miami really gives a flying fuck about a guy in houndstooth from the 50s. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. Okay, Steven Godfrey, thank you for joining the show this week. Where can the people find you?
At 38 Godfrey on Instagram, Twitter, bannersociety.com.
Very exciting. Richard.
RJ_writes. Look, if anybody's got stock tips, that's where you find me. RJ_writes.
And you can find me on my way
Somebody missed GameStop because he was snowboarding.
to the moon.